It was another long day for Riley McCabe, the lone rancher who lived in the middle of the vast desert. His cabin sat on the edge of a rugged mountain range, far away from any town or neighbor. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red as Riley rode back home on his trusted horse. He didn't mind the isolation. It was the only life he had known since the passing of his wife, Mary, years ago. She had been the light of his life, but after her death, Riley withdrew from the world, pouring all his energy into his land and cattle. That evening, however, something unusual caught his eye. As he made his way down a narrow trail, he noticed something strange in the distance. At first, he thought it was just the shadows playing tricks on him, but as he got closer, the sight before him made his blood run cold. Hanging from the branches of a large twisted tree were 7 young women, their bodies limp and lifeless. Their skin was pale, their eyes wide open in terror, even in death. Riley's heart skipped a beat. He was no stranger to the violence of the Wild West, but seeing such brutality against young women, especially Apache girls, was something else entirely. He couldn't just ride away. Riley's heart pounded as he quickly dismounted and ran toward the tree. The girls' bodies were tied with thick ropes, the rough fibers cutting into their skin. His hands shook as he untied the knots, each second feeling like an eternity. With a grunt of effort, he managed to cut the ropes and gently lower their bodies to the ground. The girls were all unconscious, some still breathing, others barely hanging on to life. Their faces were bruised and swollen, their clothes torn and dirty. Riley's mind raced. Who could do such a thing? And why? He knew the Apache people had been in conflict with settlers for years, but this seemed too cruel, too deliberate. He couldn't just leave them here to die. With great care, he lifted the nearest girl into his arms and carried her to his horse. He quickly gathered the rest of them, taking them one by one to his cabin. It was a rough ride, but Riley was determined. When they finally arrived at his cabin, he made sure they were comfortable, covering them with blankets to warm them up. They were small, fragile, like birds with broken wings. Inside, Riley started a fire, his mind still spinning with questions. He had a simple life, but he had learned enough to know that something big was at play here. Why would anyone want to hurt these girls so badly? And why leave them hanging as a warning? As the night wore on, Riley worked quietly, tending to each girl's wounds as best as he could. His hands moved with skill, cleaning cuts and bruises, trying to stop the bleeding. The youngest girl, barely more than a child, was the most hurt. Her forehead was swollen, and her breathing was shallow. Riley did what he could to make her comfortable, but he knew he wasn't a doctor. The girls didn't wake up that night. Riley kept watch over them, checking on them regularly. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but inside, Riley's cabin was warm and safe. The next morning, the girls began to stir. The youngest one opened her eyes first, her gaze frightened and confused, and she looked around the cabin, taking in the strange surroundings before her eyes landed on Riley. She flinched at first, but then seemed to relax when she saw the kindness in his eyes. Riley offered her a warm bowl of stew, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she just stared at him, as if unsure of his intentions. Slowly, one by one, the other girls woke up. Each of them seemed equally cautious, but they all looked to Riley with an odd mix of fear and gratitude. Riley knew they wouldn't speak easily. They were Apache and he was a settler. They didn't trust him and he didn't blame them. But there was something in their eyes, something that told him they needed help. They weren't just survivors. They were part of something bigger. As he sat with them, trying to understand what had happened, he noticed something strange. Despite their fear, the girls didn't seem to be as young as they first appeared. Their faces were full of experience, of hardship. Riley's instincts told him that these girls weren't just victims. They were connected to something much larger. But what? Hours passed, and as Riley worked to feed and care for them, he noticed something else. The girls never spoke. Not a word. They only nodded or shook their heads when he asked them questions. It was clear they were frightened, but there was something more. They were hiding something. Riley's gut told him that there was more to this story than he could see. By the third day, one of the girls, a tall, strong-looking young woman with dark hair, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Why did you save us?" Riley didn't hesitate. "No one deserves to die like that." She looked at him carefully, her eyes searching his face. "But you're a settler. Why help us?" Riley leaned back, taking a deep breath. "I don't care about what side you're on. What happened to you was wrong, and I'm not going to stand by and do nothing." The girl seemed to think about this for a moment, and then nodded. "We were captured, taken from our people. They were going to use us to make a point." Riley's heart sank. He had feared it was something like that, but hearing it from her lips made it real. These girls weren't just random victims. They were part of a larger plan. A plan that had gone terribly wrong. But who was behind it? And why? Riley didn't have answers yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. The more he learned about these girls, the more he realized that their survival was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. The sun set once again as Riley sat by the fire, watching the girls slowly begin to heal. But he knew that the real challenge had only just begun. The plot that had led to their near death wasn't just about a few captured girls, it was about something far darker. And Riley was going to get to the bottom of it, no matter the cost. As he looked out into the night, Riley felt a growing sense of unease. There were forces at work here far beyond what he could see, and he was about to be pulled right into the middle of it. The next few days passed in a tense silence, but Riley could feel something was shifting in the girls. They were beginning to trust him, but there was still a wall between them, a barrier that neither Riley nor the girls could easily break down. They had all suffered too much, and the trauma was deep. Riley continued to care for them as best as he could, making sure they were fed and as comfortable as possible. He tried to get them to talk more about what had happened, but they remained silent, their eyes filled with fear every time he asked questions. He could see that their silence wasn't born from distrust, but from something deeper, something they were scared to share. One evening, as Riley sat outside, the sky painted with the fading colors of dusk, one of the girls, the eldest of the group, approached him. She had long, dark hair and a scar that ran across her cheek. It was clear she had seen far too much in her young life. She was the first to truly open up. "Thank you for saving us," she said quietly, her voice shaky but sincere. "But there's more. The people who did this to us, they're not just trying to kill our people. They're trying to destroy everything." Riley's heart raced as he listened to her words. He leaned forward, eager to hear more. "The men who captured us, they work for the local law. They have land and gold, and they've been forcing our people off it for years. They used us to send a message to show the Apache that we are nothing to them." She paused, her eyes clouded with memories. "But we are not just anyone. We are daughters of the leaders of our tribe. And when we were taken, it was more than just to kill us, it was to weaken our people." Riley felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over him. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made him sick to his stomach. The greed of men like that was what kept the violence alive in the West. These girls weren't just victims, they were pawns in a game far bigger than they were. "They are trying to drive the Apache into a corner, make us so weak that we will have no choice but to submit," the girl continued, her voice hardening. "But what they don't know is that our people will never bow to them." Riley nodded, understanding the strength that ran through the girl's words. But still the question lingered. Why hadn't they killed these girls outright? Why leave them to die slowly in the woods? The answer hit Riley like a thunderclap. "They wanted us to send a message," the girl said. "A message that we are nothing. But they never expected that someone like you would save us." Riley's mind was reeling. It all made sense now. The girls were meant to be martyrs, symbols of how the Apache had been crushed. But something had gone wrong. Riley had intervened at the right moment, and now he had the power to change things, to stop these men from completing their cruel plan. That night Riley didn't sleep. He kept watch, thinking about what the girl had said. He had saved them, but what now? These men would not stop until they had wiped out the Apache people, and Riley could feel in his bones that the danger was far from over. He had to do something. The next morning, Riley rode into the nearest town. He had to gather information, find out who these men were, who was pulling the strings. He couldn't risk the girl's safety any longer, and the town might hold answers. Riley was careful not to reveal too much, but the town was full of whispers. Strange, quiet talks about the Apache, and their supposed uprising. As Riley made his way through the streets, he overheard a conversation between two men leaning against the local saloon. They spoke in low tones, but Riley's sharp ears caught every word. "You hear? Those Apache girls, the ones that got hung?" one man said. "Yeah, the rancher saved him. Crazy fool. He doesn't know what he's got himself into." The other man chuckled, a dark, cold sound. "They've been keeping them hidden. But that won't last. The law's already on the lookout. And once they find them, it'll be too late." Riley's heart raced. It was clear now, the law wasn't just involved, they were the ones leading this charge. The town was being manipulated by these men, and the Apache were being used as pawns in a much larger game. Riley had no doubt the girls' lives were in even more danger now than ever. He returned to his cabin that evening, his mind spinning with everything he had learned. There was no time to waste. The girls had to leave, and they had to leave soon. But he couldn't send them out alone. They needed protection, and they needed a plan. The next morning, Riley gathered the girls and explained the situation to them. He was honest with them, telling them that the lawmen would be coming, looking for them. He also told them that he wouldn't let them be taken, that he would do everything in his power to protect them. The eldest girl, the one who had spoken to him earlier, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. "We are ready," she said firmly. "We won't hide. We'll fight." The others nodded in agreement, their faces hardening with resolve. They were no longer helpless victims. They were survivors, and they would fight for their lives and the lives of their people. Riley knew this wasn't just about saving these girls anymore. It was about stopping the men who had caused so much pain and destruction. He would not let them succeed, not when there was still a chance to make things right. Over the next few days, Riley and the girls prepared. They practiced what little fighting skills they had, and Riley taught them how to use the land to their advantage. They would need to move quickly and quietly, using the mountains and forests as cover. Then on the third night after their preparations, the lawmen arrived. Riley had been expecting them. He had set up a series of traps around the cabin, and as the men moved in, they triggered each one. The sounds of branches snapping and rocks rolling down the hills sent the lawmen into a frenzy. It was just enough time for Riley and the girls to escape into the wilderness. Riley, leading the way, kept the girls safe as they ran through the night. The men were close behind, but they couldn't catch them. Not this time. Riley knew the fight wasn't over, but as long as they were free, there was hope. And Riley McCabe was a man who believed in fighting for what was right, no matter the cost. The dawn broke as Riley and the girls made their way into the hills, knowing that the battle for their lives and their people was only just beginning.